what has not changed actually since the AI tools introduction? What remains the same?
The overall process of thinking about product development, right? We have to build something that is both valuable for users and something that will help our business.
So in this turbulent times, let's say, what would be your recommendation for other fellow product managers?
There's a heavy emphasis on specialized skills. It is really important both for your professional development and for your employability to learn specific skills. Get really deep in an industry because AI isn't just a new way to add features to products or a new way to build products. It is becoming more and more pervasive.
We talked briefly about like what would you do as a new product manager in a little startup, and now how larger organizations, so how flexible are they in adapting these new technologies?
So we are seeing even the most conservative companies launch small internal LLMs, build their own, try to experiment with things that are not sensitive. What I'm also seeing is in these larger organizations, just knowing that it is the future or that we should be investing in it is not enough. As a product developer, product manager, engineer, there is a need sometimes to justify the investment in these tools, and that's where we can sometimes get stuck in these ROI calculations that are very shady at best.
Hold up. Before we dive in, let's give a shout out to AppMixer, the game changer in SaaS automation. AppMixer is a no-code platform that helps SaaS companies ship AI agents in their products in days. The way it works is simple. You build agents in AppMixer and deploy them in your product. As a result, your users become far more productive and you gain a competitive edge in the AI race. AI is changing the SaaS industry, bringing both challenges and opportunities. And that's exactly what this podcast is all about. Tackling the day-to-day challenges of product management. In each episode, I sit down with product management heroes who face these challenges every day. I ask the questions, they bring the practical answers. Without further ado, let's see who's joining us today. Everybody, it's the next episode of our PM Insights by AppMixer. And today it's a great pleasure to welcome Ivana Ciric, the Principal Product Manager at Thoughtworks. So welcome, Ivana. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm doing great. It's a beautiful morning here in Seattle. How about yourself?
Yeah, doing fine. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Thank you for being my guest today for today's topic, which is AI in the Product Manager's Toolbox. And so maybe let's start, Ivana, with your background. If you could share a brief bio of how you got there where you are, that'd be awesome.
Sure. So currently, I'm a principal product manager at Thoughtworks. Within our customer experience, product and design practice leadership. So that means I work with our clients directly to build products with them. And of course, we're increasingly seeing the use of AI tools in those product builds. Um, and I also work with them to improve their product practices internally, build out their product teams, and scale them. Internally at ThoughtWorks, I also help our own practice to evolve. Again, especially seeing the rise in AI tools right now and how that impacts how we build and what we'll be discussing today. I also coach and mentor our product practitioners and just practitioners more broadly. How did I get here? I mean, I've always been in technology. I started out in an engineering sort of coding role and then graduated into the product world. Have always been on product discovery and delivery. And I just loved the idea of working with so many different types of clients and different types of products. And so I landed in the professional services world. And now I'm getting to see how all of our clients are adapting to everything that's going on in the market.
I see. All right, great. Thanks for that introduction. So let's go to the topic that we have here for today. You mentioned, we will be talking about tools, AI tools that product managers can use today. But let's first talk about how has product development evolved with the rise of generative AI and AI agents. What do you see? What has changed in the recent years? It's been pretty quick. So, what's your reflection on the last few months, actually?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, it's interesting, and this will come up throughout the conversation probably, but there is the rise of Gen AI, but there is also everything that's going on in the world right now, post-COVID, the boom, and then the subsequent crash, what's happening in the economy. And sometimes we can't disentangle that from what's happening in product development. So broadly, not just speaking about product managers, but also product development as a whole. We are still working on the two, what we sometimes like to think of the two areas. Some people call them discovery and delivery. We tend to think of them as figuring out what to build, so building the right thing, and then figuring out how to build it right, right? So how do we get the right team in place? How do we plan for it? How do we actually execute on it as quickly as possible to get the best product out in the market? So I know we are focusing on the tooling aspects. So how has generative AI and AI agents helped with product development? And we see this in pretty much every aspect of product development. We have tools that can help us both build the right thing and build the thing right. So things like ideation, we have all kinds of LLMs that we can use from the very earliest stages. Research, we have amazing co-pilots and coding tools that can help us with the actual code. So on the engineering side, we've seen so many advances in product support, customer success, right, and with these AI tools. So we can go from prototyping, even ideation, strategy, prototyping, coding, testing, releasing. I mean, everything up until even support and evolution of our product can be supported by some type of generative AI tool. A recent example from Shopify, they've just launched a tool that completely evolves how they support their customers. It allows them to scale. So a lot of opportunities here to improve productivity, right, and to be able to scale. And we'll come back to that because there's a lot more than just productivity that we can gain from using these tools. So this is the first stage. We're looking at our current tools, methods, and trying to gain something in them. But the next stage of what we're going to see is actually looking at shifting the ways we work. So do we even need, and I'll take one example, people using LLMs to write their PRDs. There are tools out there specifically to write product requirements docs, right? Do we even need them though in this world? We have to start evaluating, are these techniques, these methods that we use for product development actually valuable in this new way of building? So just a couple of things that I'm seeing right now in the market. I'm sure we'll talk more about them later.
Yeah, we'll get to the specific tools and use cases where you see the biggest potential for using AI tools right in a moment. But maybe if we're getting back to that like introduction and like what has not changed actually since the AI tools introduction, what remains the same in product? I guess you already answered it partially, but what are some of the things that you think will never change and AI will never fill the gap there?
Never say never. I have seen AI tools improve even in the last couple of months where we're constantly seeing new evolutions of these tools. So even thinking about prompting, for example, at first it was just, a blank screen, a blank text field and you had to type something in. But now many of the tools that exist are suggesting prompts. There are prompting libraries. So if you had said, oh, this prompting is going to be a competitive advantage forever, that is not the case, because there are a lot of ways that you can now find ways to get better at it, and that are available out there publicly. So I will hesitate to say never. However, there are some things today that I still see happening. The overall process of thinking about product development, right? We have to build something that is both valuable for users and something that will help our business. And sometimes we focus on one over the other, depending on the stage that we're at. So that flow of what to build and then how to build it still continues today. One skill that I find I've been thinking about recently quite a bit is the idea that we have to know how to describe what we want. So whether you are now a one-person startup and you're, to use a term that's come up recently, right? Vibe coding, whether you are an engineer and you're trying to build something, it is so important when you have Gen AI tools in the mix, whether you have Gen AI tools or agents, to be able to describe what you're looking for. There are so many possibilities when you try to explain something, even in the past or in traditional product management and product development, where you would have maybe handoffs or where you'd have a team working together. There could still be a lot of misunderstanding. So that part hasn't changed. I need to be able to express very clearly what I want to build, what's the vision behind it, what's the strategy, how do I envision that our users, our customers are going to benefit from it. So super, super important skill. We may have a different mechanism. Maybe we're not writing user stories. Maybe we're not writing PRDs. Maybe we are. But to these tools, we still need to be able to describe and then work with them to evolve what we want to build. One of the things that I'm seeing with clients is that no matter, I've worked in this industry for many years, and clients still, some use a traditional waterfall approach still, and they're a modern technology company. Some use Agile, some are Save, dual track. There is such a variety of ways of approaching product, and I don't see that going away. You have to use what aligns with your company culture. You have to use what aligns with the skill sets that your team has and what's appropriate for your industry and type of product as well. So we're still going to have many different ways that companies build, and it's still going to be very important to keep your company and industry context. That is why we still continue to work with companies, regardless of what industry they're in, to help evolve the product practices and the tooling to be appropriate to their teams.
That's great. Actually, I really like the note that never say never. It's really exciting to see how the AI tools are evolving every day, and something great unimaginable is suddenly ready and you can use it and employ it right away. So in this turbulent times, let's say, what would be your recommendation for other fellow product managers? What should they focus on learning, or what skills should they strengthen these days?
I mentioned one. The one that comes to mind after that is really, we focus so much on the end tools that are using all of our data, all of our information, but we don't talk about how important it is to have clarity around our methods, right? The approaches that we take and our internal knowledge. Again, whether it's about our company, whether it's about our method. I'll give you an example just because it's really close to me. I've worked on developing our product thinking playbook internally at Thoughtworks. It is not just a deck of cards, but it's really like a repository of all of the methods that we use. examples of them, how to best do them, what you need to think about. And just codifying that is like codifying culture, like codifying this is what sets us apart as an organization. Having something like that that is clearly articulated, again, going back to being able to communicate, is such an important key factor for all of these AI tools. Again, same thing with data. We work with many organizations that are in the process of understanding how do they gather and make sense of all of this structured and unstructured data that we have, whether it's life sciences, whether it's oil and gas. So these traditional industries that actually we've been spending so much time in the last however many years, I mean, decades, right? Gathering, collecting so much data, we still have many organizations and product managers who just skip over to the AI part, but forget that there is so much value in being clear on your data and all of your method. So that is important. And honestly, just experimenting with all of these tools, I have experimented myself. I have gotten very stuck and frustrated. But as I mentioned, the tools are evolving at such a rapid pace that we are going to continue to see improvement, and it will be a lot easier for us to use them in whatever state they end up in if we've been following along. That doesn't mean that it has to become a full-time job, but experiment, right? That's the best thing you can do now. So communication, creating repeatable artifacts, methods, tools for yourself that the AI can leverage, and then looking at experimenting with all of these tools. What are they good at? What are they not so good at? Where do you have to develop new skills, prompting, evals, all of these things that they kind of mix, whether you're building AI products or using AI tools. And then I'll just add one more. I think it's really important when you look at the industry right now and what are employers looking for. There's a heavy emphasis on specialized skills. So whether you plan to be in your current industry for a while or you plan to move around, it is really important both for your professional development and for your employability to learn specific skills. Get really deep in an industry because AI isn't just a new way to add features to products or a new way to build products. It is becoming more and more pervasive. But what is the value that you're actually building for your customers? You need to be deep in an industry to know how to build value for your customers, for your business, and how to apply AI to it. So super important.
When you mentioned that you created a playbook, you said that you created in Thoughtworks.
Yes.
Do you give access to those AI tools to that playbook? Like, do you feed the content of it so then the AI is thinking in the terms of what it found in the playbook?
Yes.
I see. Okay,
Absolutely. So we have we have an AI tool that we've built internally that we use that has fed the playbook into it. It helps us use the playbook, but we also maintain a practice of using the playbook manually because in the back end, it is an Airtable repository. It is very well organized. It has many different, so we have fields like, is this a remote first practice? Is this possible to do remotely? Just given, again, how many companies are developing products remotely. And things like, here's a description. Who are the subject matter experts? So you can go to them. Who are some of the clients and products we've worked on that are great examples of this technique? So yes, we have fed that into AI as well, and we work with both AI and just the traditional tool when we're developing.
And so now, how do you train your teams, or like you hire a new product manager to your team, and let's say they don't have an experience using these AI tools. So how do they jump straight in? How they become valuable as soon as possible? How do you train them to use these tools? And is it all sort of written in the playbook and they just list through, or are there any specific trainings on how it works and so on?
Yeah, so the playbook itself, although it does mention tools that are appropriate for a specific technique, it doesn't necessarily endorse them. It's intended to be a very flexible framework for you to think about your kind of like to think about thinking in a way, right? Because there are, for example, right, let's pick a technique, user story mapping, right? There are many tools you can use for user story mapping. And with AI, this has evolved too. You can just sit with an LLM and go through user story mapping. So we are less focused on the tools, more focused on the knowledge aspect of it and the practice aspect of it. So when somebody new joins our team, we have many different internal training courses. We have an internal training course for the playbook specifically. It teaches several of the methods, but more importantly, it teaches how you would approach this very nebulous area of product development, given that the companies you work with will all have their own different flavors. As I mentioned, people are still using Safe, people are still using Waterfall. So how do you integrate some of the best practices with respect to these different techniques without having to specifically focus on a tool? But within the AI, specifically Gen AI tool space, we have internal trainings that our thought workers have built that are self-learning. So you can go on anytime into our learning and development portal. You can open them up, experiment with them. And some of my favorite aspects of being at ThoughtWorks is just how much folks share what they're working on. We have weekly demos where we share, here are the AI tools that we've developed. Here is how our clients are using them. Here's something new that I learned. So we have quite a well-developed curriculum for learning around the Gen AI space. But we also have a culture where there are low stakes ways that people can share and learn and experiment out in public that don't have any kind of performance element to them. They're purely, hey, I did this cool thing, let me share it with you. So that's some of the things. It's really important to foster a culture that's accepting of experimentation, but then you also have to invest in providing those tools, providing the training for them, and making it exciting, showing what can be done, what's the art of the possible.
Well, it seems like that you're quite far down the road, actually. Everything seems to be well processed. There's a lot of resources for the people that join your team. Now, if you would take a step back and let's imagine you join a small startup, you're the first product manager there, and now what would be some of the AI tools that you use today that you would bring aboard right away, and like what specifically would you choose to work with if you're at the beginning?
That's a great question because it honestly it depends on the stage of the company, it depends on the expertise. So if let's say that there is no Gen AI tooling being used, um, I'll focus on product management, but I'm going to hopefully assume that coding assistants are being used, right? Because this is an area where we've seen so much improvement and so much benefit. We've seen how many engineers love coding assistants. So, and there's so many resources around it, right? But along with each of the tools that we bring in, it's also important to make sure that we're investing in our practice, in our craft. From the product management perspective, just even, and again, because I work with so many companies, a lot of these conversations around privacy, security, right, come into intellectual property, come into the picture. So I'm in a startup, maybe those are, further down the road conversations, but making sure that our product folks, so maybe I'm the first one, but are using LLMs as a start, right? Being able to think about divergent ideas, right? Starting with ideation, starting with structuring some of the work that you're doing. And then it's really looking at where do people need support? Maybe we have a lot of engineers and we want to help them express what they're doing, but they don't really have time for it. So looking at those core skills where you're really, really good at something, but you need to get something else done and you need to accelerate it. You'll hire somebody on later, but you've written some code, you don't really have time to write documentation for it. Let's use AI to write that documentation. Let's use AI to explain. So again, maybe lots of engineers, not enough PMs. Let's use the LLMs to describe what the code is doing so that we can save our engineers time and help them help us understand what's happening in the code. Any of the other more involved or later on in the process tools, I would first look at where the team does well and where the team is struggling, and then choose accordingly. But because I've worked across many industries, it really depends, right? I'm excited about prototyping using Gen AI tools, and that's what I see quite often in startups now is let's just get a V. There's a product called V0, right? So let's get a V0 out. Let's just talk about our idea in a much higher level of fidelity than you could as a single person, whether you're a designer or an engineer or a product manager. You can get super high fidelity working prototypes with just a prompt or two, right? So those are the few things that come to mind when I think about starting up and what are some of the first tools that I would look into using.
Great. So your recommendation would be start with LLMs, experiment with them. Like, is there any specific LLM that you would prefer, or are they kind of like interchangeable? Like, does it matter whether you ask ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or anything else? And are there any specific tools that only product managers, for example, use, or is it more about the prompt and then the data that you feed the model with so that it realizes that now I've got the role, I'm helping product manager to do their job?
So, and again, this is where we come back to never say never, or how to pick. I mean, it is impossible to keep up with all of the releases that are coming out. But what is true is that each of these LLMs, each of these tools is continuing to evolve. So I'm not aware of, let's say, among the LLMs, of anything super differentiating right now in the product management world that I can say, yes, for sure use Gemini because it's way better than the others. But this is where we come back to making sure that you experiment within the parameters that you have. So for security or privacy or legal reasons, your company may choose to use one over the other. So of course, being careful not to put any sensitive information into any of them, really, making sure that you are secure in that sense. But I'm not aware of any differentiating features that would say, yes, yes, use Gemini for sure, or use ChatGPT of the LLMs. And then your second question was around, is it about the prompts, right?
Um,
And the data that you're feeding it?
well, I meant it the way that yeah, like if you prefer like specific LLM that you use on a regular basis,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and like not, I mean, probably it's not about the prompt today, as you mentioned. The LLMs are already
Yeah.
starting suggesting uh, or improving your prompts, right? So this has advanced quite a lot. I think like half a year ago or a year ago, we were
Yep.
discussing that this is going to be a new prompt economy because you need to ask the AI in the right way to
Yes.
produce the right outputs. But half a year ago and today we're navigating in a totally different world where AI has taken over that as well. It seems to me, at least. Um,
Yes. Yes.
uh, so yeah, I just wanted to know your opinion on like whether it's about the specific LLM that you use, or just like you can just feed the data or the information what the LLM should do to any LLM and it will perform equally.
Uh, I do use Gemini internally because that is the ecosystem that we are part of, but I don't necessarily think that Gemini will provide better results. We're all still experimenting. It's still very early days. We're still in that phase of the productivity gains, right? So let me try it, see what happens. We're in a learning stage as well
Mhm.
because these tools are evolving so quickly. Yes, you're so right about prompts, though. It and again we have lots of training that we quickly developed during that stage of okay, how do you prompt? But now there are all of these prompting hacks and techniques and tips that are everywhere on the internet. I still think it's really important that even a small difference in how you prompt, your own natural way of speaking, of writing, is going to produce different results. So I'm going to say it again and keep saying it. Keep trying different things. And maybe if you have an LLM and you're trying to get it to do something and it's not working, try and you have access to a different one, try a different one. See if the results are the same or different, and try it within a couple of weeks or a month, and your results are, at this point, they're guaranteed to be different, just given the pace of evolution.
Great. Can you now share some common mistakes that you see or some oversights you've seen when adopting AI tools in product development? I think you mentioned already one, at least, the kind of like a regulatory things or like a compliance requirements. Maybe you're bound by some SOC 2 things and things like that. So I guess maybe their Gemini has some edge over some other LLMs that are just starting. What are some other mistakes
Yep.
that you see product managers or people in general doing while leveraging AI tools in product development?
Oh, I have so many. I hope you have some time.
Absolutely.
So, the first thing that one thing that comes to mind really quickly is we're focusing a lot on productivity. So I've worked with companies that have said, well, it takes me 5 minutes to do this one coding task now, and it's going to take me 1 minute to do it with Gen AI. So therefore, my productivity is improving. And while it is very important to make a business case for any tool that you're adopting, AI tools included, we're in a period where it is not easy to make that kind of determination, especially in very concrete, minute by minute terms. So zooming out and saying and acknowledging that now we have to learn a different set of skills, and it is in our best interest to invest in it right now, even though we believe, but we're not 100% sure what kind of productivity gains we will see. When we measure productivity, you see folks focusing on specific areas and really cherry picking the data to make their case. And again, I have seen in my own workflows and with our engineering and design practitioners that they are seeing productivity gain, but it's important to think bigger. What do we have to learn in order to be more productive? And what can we do now that we couldn't do with AI beyond just productivity? When I think about an analogy from the past, we thought email was going to, when it first came out, it's going to make our lives so much easier. We wouldn't have to, we would just get instant responses from everyone, and there would be so much less miscommunication and everyone would be more efficient. But what happened was kind of the opposite. Email, it takes up a significant portion of some of our days. And whether it's email or now Slack or other communication tools, being able to communicate more quickly has actually eroded our ability to communicate. So what will AI tools do? I've spent a significant amount of time in researching digital well-being, how devices and technologies impact our brain. So really, I would encourage people to think about, now that I've been using LLMs or Gen AI tools for a little while, a month, a year, 2 years, how am I doing my job differently? Could I go back to pre-LLM? What is my thinking process like now? How is it impacting overall my ability to perform my work? Right? It's not just about how our roles have changed, but how have we changed as a result of using these tools? So most people are focusing on the hype, focusing on the learning, which you absolutely should do, but the consequences of it, we're not. Um, right? A couple of other ones, people not checking the output of AI. It's really, really easy to just start seeing better and better results. And yes, for low stakes, maybe you don't need to check, or for ideation, maybe you don't need to check the output as in as much detail. But when you are releasing code to production, when you're impacting not just individual users, but entire societies, communities, you do want to make sure that at a very basic level, you're checking what's coming out and you have some guardrails in place. What else? I mean, maybe I'll just end with one of the things that I see quite often, and it comes out of not checking your work, is folks I work with are now able to generate much more. So whether it's a prototype or some type of communication or documentation, you can now just generate 5, 6, 10 different options for this output, and then somebody, whether it's yourself or somebody you're working with, has to review all of that extra information that may not be very clearly different from, the options may not be that clearly different from each other. So how can we make sure that we're not generating more, but of similar or lower quality, right? There's a lot that comes into whether it's prompting or using the tools right, or double checking or having that human in the loop, but taking the time to understand, super important.
Great. Now, can we take a look at using these AI tools, these kind of new ways for product managers in larger organizations? We talked briefly about like what would you do as a new product manager in a little startup, and now how larger organizations, and I understand you have experience working with some of the companies, so how flexible are they in adapting these new technologies? Are there any, I guess there are some differences between these startups and larger organizations, how and the flexibility of using these new technologies. So how do you implement these new technologies in larger organizations?
Well, the encouraging thing that I have seen is even the most restricted organizations have found a way and are actively investing in AI tooling for their workforce. Um, there are, again, when we talk about the larger providers, they have the ability to offer certain protection, whether it's legal or security, privacy, for their customers. So we are seeing even the most conservative companies launch small internal LLMs, build their own, try to experiment with things that are not sensitive. So I am seeing companies across the spectrum investing, those larger companies. What I'm also seeing is, in these larger organizations, just knowing that it is, the future, or that we should be investing in it, is not enough. As a product developer, product manager, engineer, there is a need sometimes to justify the investment in these tools, and that's where we can sometimes get stuck in these ROI calculations that are very shady at best, right? We don't have that clear of an idea of how much we're going to improve. One thing that I have seen work quite well in any type of transformation, though, is when you take a small team of people who are dedicated to solving a very focused problem, whether it's with a new technology or a new process, new approach, and you get them to be focused without any external noise or dependencies on solving that problem, and then share it out on as many channels as you can. That tends to work quite well in combination with, I mean, there are lots of top-down companies that will, it's really important to have somebody in senior leadership who is actively advocating for these tools and investing in them. But people are afraid of change. And when you work in a large company, culture doesn't necessarily just happen on its own. If you're trying to implement a transition, a transformation, you have to work with both people who are really excited about it and people who are looking at the vision for the future. With large, I mean, it's irrespective of organization size. When you look at some of the fear around generative AI tooling, it's also about people feeling that loss of job security. Oh, if I start using Gen AI now, maybe my company will look to eliminate my role because I'll realize that they can just use AI. And I will just say that I have not yet experienced this, but there's certainly a need to build trust within the team, whether it's a large organization. So you start with your smallest, most basic unit, your product trio, your product squad, your product team, and you try to build that sense of trust where people can experiment with each other, where people can be open with each other. That will help you in gaining adoption of these tools, being able to spell out the vision of the future of this is where I see you and your role evolve, is another critical aspect. It does apply to smaller companies, but usually with startups and smaller companies, you can you're more aligned with each other because folks know each other, they're used to working with each other, there is a sort of unified culture. But yeah, those are a few of the things I can think of from the sense of large organizations at scale and rolling out these tools.
All right. Thank you. So let's take a look at some last questions actually I have for you today. Is there anything that recently surprised you or inspired you in the AI space? You mentioned Shopify at the beginning, introducing something cool. What else have you noticed? What's worth checking today?
Oh, that's so hard to just pick one
Which one?
and Just, I mean, to me, the pace of progress is absolutely mind-blowing. And just to keep up with all of the new models being released, what's happening with AI agents and the capabilities with MCP. So personally, I'm inspired by all of the code generating tools. Just type in a prompt and all of a sudden you'll have a fully working prototype. So my focus right now is on experimenting more with these tools as AI agents become more developed. That's the area I'm kind of looking forward to playing around more in. And I think those will be extremely relevant for the clients that I work with day to day.
Is there anything on the other side overhyped in AI for product management today?
Ooh, so we we've kind of alluded to this, right? But this idea that you can just replace a PM, we're still not quite there yet. I've seen a lot of hype on social media about, and there have been directives at some companies. If you want to hire somebody, whether it's a PM or an engineer, you have to justify why AI cannot replace them. And I understand the intent behind really diving into, well, let's push the boundaries of what these tools can do, but we are not there yet from everything I've seen. There's still such an important element of context, of organization, of these things that have not been codified yet, right? That AI tools can leverage. We may get there, never say never, but we aren't yet today.
Right, right. I wanted to add, never say never. That's exactly what we've mentioned a few times over this discussion. Do you have a favorite book, um, tool, or practice you recommend to other product managers?
I do love to read, so always tons of product books that I can recommend depending on who I'm speaking to. But one area that I am really interested in is this idea of systems thinking. It's been around for decades. It's not something that's new, but one book that I read recently, it's called Drift into Failure by Sydney Decker. And I would encourage anybody who's working in the product development field to really focus on learning more about systems thinking. Adding Gen AI tools, adding agents just continues to increase the levels of abstraction, but also the complexity of all of the systems that we're building. And having that ability to think from a systems perspective, it's no longer, a value add. It's absolutely necessary. There are so many first order, second order, third order effects of all of what we are building now, that to have some framework and understanding of these concepts is going to help you be a better product builder. So absolutely that book, but really any others that will help you on getting up to speed on systems thinking.
Sorry, what was it again? It's called Systems Thinking, the book by, or is it?
It's called Drift into Failure
Oh,
by
okay.
Sydney Decker.
Okay, perfect. Great, thank you for that recommendation. And we are approaching really the end of the interview. I've got my favorite fives, which I ask everyone in these discussions. So the first question is, what's your number one challenge at work?
Sure. So it really depends, right, who I'm working with. Internally, one of my biggest challenges is what we talk about creating. So I mentioned the playbook, creating repeatable methods out of everything that's happening so quickly right now. So we have our repeatable methods, our tried and tested product development methods, but now evolving those to make sure that they still work in the AI world, creating new ones, which will help with building AI products, which will help with using AI tools. So just making sure that we stay on top of the industry and the practice and continuing to develop the craft. It's something I'm very excited about, but it is also it's a huge challenge. But that's why we're here, right? So that's one of the big ones internally.
Okay. If you could choose one key metric, the North Star that defines your success as a product leader, what would it be?
So if I think about product leadership, I think about scaling myself through my team. So whatever impact my team has had on the success of our customers, the success of the business. And I can't disentangle the two. You can measure impact in many different ways, but as a leader, my measure of success would be how well my teams are doing. Um, and I think if you're helping your customers be successful, your business has a lot of potential to be successful as well. Not always the case that both happen, but yes, the impact my teams have had.
Okay. And how do you collect feedback from your customers? What processes and tools do you use for that?
Well, when I'm talking, so whenever I work with a new client, I will adapt to the tools that they're using. So as someone who works with many companies, it depends. But when I think about my clients and the companies I work with, actually sometimes just going back to the basics and sitting down over coffee and talking through in a very direct way what can be, I mean, one of my favorite ways to collect feedback is retros. Those have not lost their relevance in today's world, and maybe we forget how important they are to building trust. I think that when you sit down with someone and you have a really open conversation, it's yes, they feel heard. It helps them trust you more and it helps you understand what's really, really important and get below the surface. So to me, I mean, just talking to people face to face or synchronously, if at all possible, um, yes, you can collect a lot more data using more automated ways, but having that human touch point still really valuable for me, whichever product I'm building.
I totally agree. Thank you for that comment. I think it's very important, especially in these times and the topic we've been discussing today. Build versus buy. How do you decide?
Yeah, maybe just a really quick one, right? When you are, and I've seen this again across many, many clients, when this is a core differentiator for your company, focus on building. And this is something that I see companies do quite often, it's a non-core feature, but you have to build it, whether it's something like security or whether it's something like I worked on a retail software for consumer electronics. You're building the core product, but you still need to get it into stores. I know people still go to physical stores if you can believe it, right? But building the software for the store version of your product, maybe that's something that you can buy a service for or buy a product for that you don't really need to focus your team's time on, right? But what is it that differentiates you? And then really dive deep into that. And then the last thing that I also see companies investing in is if they're at a certain scale, again, large tech companies will build their own tooling because they have control over it. And again, could be privacy, security reasons, competitive reasons. So yeah, a couple of reasons to build versus buy.
Perfect. And my last question, actually, I think we quite covered it, but maybe you will think of another specific use case that you can share. What role do AI and AI agents play in your product strategy? Could you briefly share a specific use case you're aiming to solve with AI for your users?
Yeah, let's talk about. I don't think I mentioned these two, but there is a really interesting example where we've worked with um, preclinical drug discovery with a company where, again, going back to you have to make sure that you can first access your data, understand it, and then use it in the form of, let's say, a chatbot, right? To get valuable information that would be impossible for you to get otherwise. I'm seeing the same thing in the oil and gas space. There are so many technical pieces of data that are very highly unstructured, some of them from decades and decades ago, that are out there, but we can't do anything with them. So being able to get that data to be accessible and then put an LLM on top of it has been something that we're working on with clients, and it's been transformative for their business. Another really fun, interesting use case has been around personalization in the fitness space specifically. I can't speak to the exact client, but I can say they are quite large, and there is already so much work in the fitness, the wellness space. There are so many products, and AI is very, very quickly becoming a way for these companies to scale their impact. So a couple of different areas that we're in different industries that we're working with in the AI space. And I mean, we've talked about Thoughtworks and our product thinking playbook and how AI really plays with extending our ability to help our clients by scaling, by codifying that information and that culture that we have. And it's one of our three key areas: design, engineering, and AI. So going beyond just, oh, hey, let's use AI tools, or let's maybe build a couple of chatbots, but how does AI transform the way that we think? How does it transform the way that we build products? And this is very, very much still an evolving field that's super exciting to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I'm also excited to see what's next. So, Ivana, thank you very much for being my guest today. Thank you for sharing your ideas and a number of use cases that you mentioned. Before we say goodbye, please tell us where listeners can find you or follow you. What maybe social network are you most active at?
I am not very active. I try to limit my time, but I can be reached on LinkedIn. I can share the link with you, and you can share it in the post that you do. So LinkedIn is probably the best place to reach out to me.
Okay, great. Perfect. So yeah, we'll make sure to tag you obviously, and we'll be happy if you share the podcast. So thank you once again, and yeah, see you next time.
It's been a great discussion. Thank you.